Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. You have tuned into the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. This is Linux in the Ham Shack, and this is episode number 414, which is a short topics episode. And in our short topics episode, we cover things from the amateur radio world, the open source world, and then we fuse them together in what we call Linux in the Ham Shack, our main segment, which you'll hear a little bit later on. But before we get to all that, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right, and in the tradition, at least lately, of talking about Utes on the air, we have a lead topic tonight, which has to do with young hams, and Bill's going to tell us all about it.
That's right. These are nominations ending for Amateur Radio Newsline's Young Ham of the Year Award. The deadline to nominate a deserving young radio amateur for the 2021 Bill Pasternak WA6ITF Amateur Radio Newsline Young Ham of the Year Award is just days away. If you know an outstanding licensed amateur radio amateur under the age of 18 in the U.S., Canada, or any of the U.S. possessions, please download the nominating form from our website. Complete it and email it back to newsline@arnewsline.org. prior to midnight Eastern Time on Monday, May 31st. The award presentation will be held at the Huntsville, Alabama Hamfest on Saturday, August 21st. We sincerely hope to see you and your young ham there. And, of course, that came from Don Wilbanks, AE5DW of Amateur Radio Newsline. So get your nominations in.
And obviously the folks down at the Huntsville Hamfest are really committed to the fact that they are going to have an in-person Hamfest this year, so let's hope that actually happens. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it is, mid-August, so got some time. So as long as there's not some big COVID kerfuffle between now and then, it should be a thing. And then we can all gear up for Hamvention 2022. Yikes. So anyway, moving on to amateur radio topics. Well, another amateur radio topic, actually. We have new electromagnetic exposure limits in the UK. Ofcom have published their final decision on changes to the Wireless Telegraphy Act, licenses requiring all spectrum users, including all radio amateurs, to comply with the ICNIRP, the ICNIRP, in our new tradition of pronouncing weird letters together. General public limits on on EMF exposure. EMF, yeah. Compliance is required after November 18th, 2021 for frequencies above 110 megahertz, after the 18th of May, 2022 for frequencies above 10 megahertz but below 110 megahertz, and after 18 November 2022 for frequencies below 10 megahertz. More information can be found on their webpage. You can find information on compliance and enforcement, the policy, and an Excel-based calculator to help you evaluate your setup. And this, of course, is Ofcom, which means it affects you folks who are over in the UC. So yeah, Ofcom and the RSGB are where this came from, and you can find more info on the stories, the original stories, which will be linked in the show notes. So check that out and be aware of this going forward over there in the United Kingdom. Let's see. Let's get Cheryl in here to read this thing about the FCC.
Okay, so our next little topic here is amateurs' email addresses will stay private, according to the FCC. Starting on June 29th, all applications filed with the FCC must include an email address for FCC correspondence. After receipt of the initial announcement that all future applications would require an email address, ARRL was concerned for the privacy of its members and requested that amateurs' email addresses not be made public. This week, the FCC agreed, stating in an email to ARRL Council that it will continue to mask amateurs' email addresses from public view in the universal licensing system. The FCC will use the email address supplied by amateurs to correspond with applicants, including to send a link to the official electronic copy of the license when an application is granted. And this information came from the ARRL.
Well, the information came from the FCC.
Well,
it was reported.
It was reported, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where we got the information from, was the ARRL. So.
Right. Absolutely. ARRL, almost as good as Southgate at creating news.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, very good. So they're going to keep the email addresses obfuscated in the database. That's good. of course, you just go on to qrz.com and you can see all the email addresses you want.
Don't you have to log in order to see it, though?
Yes.
Yeah,
but you have to
but
log in.
it's
Yeah.
free login. So, I mean, how's it,
Well, but you can't as just somebody going out trolling for email addresses. I think you actually have to have a call sign.
Yeah,
approved.
you have to log in to QRZ, right? Which I don't know. I mean, has anyone tried to fake logging into QRZ? I'm sure they have, right?
No, I haven't. So.
Well, no, not you.
Well, would anybody that listens to us go, I should try to fake log in, even though I've got a license.
Let's create a fake login over there, QRZ.
Yeah, and off goes Bill. Yeah,
and scrape the database and get all those email addresses right and put them into our mailing list.
Well, most people that are listed as ARRL members have, of course, their call sign at ARRL.net as their email address, so they can feel free to spam away.
And whether or not they actually read that address, that's a different story. So, because I sure don't read mine. Maybe I should. Maybe there's something actually in there. I don't know.
There's a forward. It's a forward. It's not a real email address.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Oh, okay. I
so, yeah, no.
That's how up to date I am on the ARRL. The ARRL, yeah.
The old.
So speaking of acronyms, Bill's going to tell us about ROARS.
ROARS. Yeah, I found this a local story, figure from a different news source, and this proclaims that May is ROARS month. Ham radio operators in Ramona are being recognized for their dedication to emergency communications by the County Board of Supervisors, who proclaimed May as Ramona Outback Amateur Radio Society, or ROARS, month. The honor presented by Supervisor Joel Anderson describes how ROARS was founded in 1989 by the then president of the Ramona Municipal Water District and then chief of the Ramona Fire Department. The two were concerned that Ramona could not rely on outside assistance during regional disaster and depended on radio repeaters and telephone systems, which could potentially fail. The two agencies decided amateur radio operators were needed for local emergency communications, and in September of 1990, ROARS was incorporated. ROARS still maintains emergency communications skills with local self-contained solar-powered fixed and mobile radio systems and has training and regular practice. The proclamation states, I don't know why that was so hard to say. ROARS has a quote, ROARS has expanded beyond these capabilities to provide Ramona with additional community benefits and education in the world of technology and radio communication, unquote, the document states. ROARS President Steve Stipp said that the club members were more than a little touched by the month-long dedication to their group. And this came from the Ramona Sentinel. So there you go. A totally different news source for amateur radio today.
Oh, very good. It's always nice when you can find new places to get stories from that haven't been co-opted by Southgate. So,
yes,
that's right. The cat's out of the bag now. So that's the last story you'll get from them. All right. So that's it for our straight up amateur radio topics for tonight. So let's move on over to open source. And I did see the email come in about this one. So I think, Bill, you might have some editorializing to do on this, but I'll read the story first, because I know you've been following Reddit, because that's what you do.
Yes.
First open source topic, Freenode no longer community run. Staff moves to Libera Chat, or Libra Chat, probably, something like that. Why this is important, : Freenode is an IRC network that hosts chat rooms for large parts of the open source community. Yes, and we use it, actually. It's difficult to overstate its importance, even though IRC is no longer en vogue. It's not? I thought IRC was truly vogue. There's some people who do nothing but IRC and swear they will never use anything else. Screw all that Matrix and Discord and whatever other ones are. What happened? Freenode had lasted decades on a fairly informal organization. Servers are provided by volunteers or sponsors. Freenode is not a company. No staff is paid. At some point, a Freenode limited company was founded which, for example, managed conferences. Aside from holding the freenode.net domain name, it had no involvement. Recently, the owner of this company started to make legal threats against the actual volunteer staff. Staff is folding and is currently in the process of migrating their service to the newly founded Libra Chat. Don't know if there's a future for Freenode, but we'll see. So, Bill, have you been reading through the Reddit discussion? Anything else you need to add to this?
Not really to add. it's just, yeah, it's obviously a very fluid issue. So I haven't been over and tried connecting to the other server and set things up over there either. But I guess we're just going to wait and see for our particular channel, whether we do anything specific with that and whether or not Freenode ceases to exist, which I haven't heard that yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if things start to break or net split out and never come back. So we'll just keep our eyes on things.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the software that Freenode runs on, the IRC server. I was running it for a bit, but I can't remember what it's called. And I don't know if Libra Chat is using the same software, so it'll just be a different network of the same kind of servers, or if it would be something completely different. So
yeah, and it's I guess is it Libera Chat? Libera Chat?
I was trying to put the E in there when I said Libera, like Libera Chat.
Yeah,
Libera, I don't know if it's supposed to be Libera. It's probably like Libera for like liberate.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
something like that.
That sounds almost like that would be right. Liberate. I like that.
Yeah, just a silent CH. Liberate. All right. So anyway, we'll keep everybody abreast on that. And if something changes where our hosting of the Octothorpe LHS podcast channel goes somewhere else, we'll, of course, make sure everybody's aware of that. So, Cheryl, you want to read the story about System 76?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So, there is a new open source keyboard from System 76 called Launch. It is their first product compatible with Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. And keeping with their ethos, design files are readily available for anyone to view, learn from, and modify. The accompanying software configurator has also been made public. Launch's firmware is based on open source QMK firmware. Updates can only be initiated by the user and are available through POP, OS firmware settings, and LVFS. When your firmware is updated, your keyboard LEDs will flash unlocked, notifying you that the firmware is being changed. Launch features a chassis milled out of solid block of aluminum, as well as custom PCB, which is a printed circuit board. It's designed, engineered, and manufactured in Denver by a team of very particular keyboard nerds. After testing various configurations, they enjoyed and approved the final product unanimously. And this information came from System 76.
Straight from the horse's mouth. Excellent. So
if you want an expensive keyboard.
which I don't. I have so many keyboards here, I can't even imagine having another one. But
yeah, I don't know. It sounds kind of fun.
It's a $285 keyboard. But,
holy smoke.
But for those that appreciate a good mechanical style keyboard, it definitely is going to feel quite nice and probably satisfy even the hardest connoisseurs need for the clicky in their keyboard.
Yeah, I do like a clicky keyboard, but I'm weird that way. All right, and since Bill is going to probably prattle on a little bit in the Linux and the Ham Shack segment, I'm going to go ahead and read this one, and it also sort of applies to me because I actually use a CPAP. So our last story in the open source world is why sleep apnea patients rely on a CPAP machine hacker. An Australian hacker has spent thousands of hours hacking the DRM that medical devices manufacturers put on CPAP machines to create a free tool that lets patients modify their treatment. You know, I see why someone might want to do this, but it's not necessarily a good idea to just randomly change your sleep apnea settings. I mean, I think you could really do some damage to yourself. But that being said, the free, open source, and definitely not FDA-approved piece of software is a product of thousands of hours of hacking and development by a lone Australian developer named Mark Watkins, who has helped thousands of sleep apnea patients take back control of their treatment from overburdened and underinvested doctors. I wonder if that's an issue in Australia. I haven't really
socialized
noticed it
medicine, right? Ration medicine. That's probably where they have to wait, 6 months for them to get an update on their software.
Yeah, could very well be. The software gives patients access to the sleep data that is already being generated by their CPAP machines, but generally remains inaccessible, hidden by proprietary data formats that can only be read by authorized users, i.e. doctors, on proprietary pieces of software that patients often can't buy or download. Sleepyhead, and community-run forums. Wow, there's a word. Forums like CPAPtalk.com and apneaboard.com have allowed patients to circumvent medical device manufacturers who would prefer that the software not exist at all. Of course, because then they can't make money.
You just went through something where your CPAP had to be modified by a medical professional to get testing information for you. It would have been nice for you to have been able to see what it said.
Yeah. Well, I sort of can because it's part of my medical record, so I just have to ask for the record. But
well, right, but you could have been able to call the doctor up instead of having to wait a week for them to get around to getting you the equipment to blah 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 blah. You could have called the doctor up and said, by the way, my CPAP is saying blah blah. What should I do? Instead of having to rely on somebody to come and modify your CPAP in order to get the readings.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll see where this goes and see how many people wind up in jail and what.
Or dead.
Yeah. Anyway, very cool story. So that's the end of open source for tonight. Well, not open source completely, but open source specific. And so we'll move into Linux in the Ham Shack. And Bill is going to follow up on our deep dive from last week, which was about wfview. We had a good interview with the developers over there at the wfview team. And Bill has a radio, an IC7300, that is compatible with that project. And apparently did some investigation into it. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I was playing around with my toy laptop and that had Garuda on it that I couldn't get working. And I'm like, well, maybe it's just the install. I did something wrong or something like that. So I said, screw it. I'll put Ubuntu on there because it's a toy anyway. It doesn't have anything on there except for whatever I put on there. So yeah, I put a Ubuntu 2104 on there. Installed the software per the instructions, and of course it came up exactly the same way it did in Garuda and did not connect to the radio. So I was like, darn it. So I started playing around with the baud settings, and I realized that I had the rig USB controller set at 19.2, and so as soon as I set the software at 19.2, all of a sudden, boom, I got the rig control stuff was all popping there. And then I'm like, well, let me look at the manual. Oh boy. Oh, I need to have that set at 115.2 or whatever. 115.200 for the waterfall to come through. So I changed it on the rig, restarted the software, and lo and behold, boom, waterfall. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is neat. So then I started playing around with it, and I was quite amazed with how fast the readout of the rig was being brought back and forth to the display. It was literally instant. You couldn't tell any difference whatsoever between spinning the dial or changing the frequency from the little mini dial you get on the interface that we talked about. Also noticed that they had the RIT button in there and a bunch of other stuff that we had talked about, and that because I pulled the actual master branch, so they obviously made some changes and stuff like that since we chatted and since I looked at the software prior to our deep dive. So I got it all working, and I didn't try sitting it into server mode or anything else like that. I didn't quite get that far into the project, but was pleasantly surprised that everything was working as intended, with no errors being thrown out or anything else from the log. Even in debug mode, nothing was popping out odd or anything else like that. So I'm assuming it would have worked fine in Arch if I had played around with the baud settings a little earlier in my testing. No problems whatsoever following the instructions and getting it to work on the 7300. I don't know what more I can say about it. It's definitely cool to be able to show that, and I definitely see the use case for having that on the screen in large presence, especially when you're demonstrating the station, or, if you're just having fun and you like having the dial and the waterfall being displayed somewhere else, instead of looking right at the radio. It's definitely a great little tool to use with these IRCsome rigs with the waterfall. So it looks like you had some experimentation too you want to talk about.
My experimentation was very short-lived because it just simply didn't work. which they kind of said it was going to not work, at least not right away. And I think part of the problem is that I use Rig Control D, and I know they talked about the fact that they were going to integrate with Rig Control D at some point, but I was not able to remember from the discussion if that is something they'd already done or if that was on the roadmap. And in either case, it was going to require going into the documentation and finding out if such a thing was possible, and if so, how to do it. I did stop Rig Control D on both of the radios and tried to connect just using the USB interfaces and CIV and all that stuff, and still couldn't get it to work. So more work is required on my part to figure it out. They did say the 7100 is sort of like in beta or alpha or pre-alpha or whatever it is. It's one of those things because it's not one of the newer SDR-based ICs. We know they're working on it. Apparently, it doesn't work for me. There's probably something I could do to get it to work, but that's for future experimentation.
Well, something to play with. Definitely check the baud settings. Make sure everything is matchy. That was definitely my hang up with getting the basic communication, because as soon as that was in there, then all the rig control stuff was definitely present. And I think they said the interacting with Rig Control D and stuff like that would come later. I think there's an ability for you to re-expose that serial port or whatever, the serial interface or the control interface as like a virtual device back to Rig Control D to attach to. So Rig Control D would attach after this piece of software.
Does it always have to be in 115.2, no matter what?
That's just for the waterfall display. Like I say, I was getting all the rig control stuff working at 19.200. So
okay, because everything here is set for 96. So
yeah. So as long as the rig's set for 96 and the software set for 9600, it should pass the CIV stuff minimally.
I don't remember seeing a place to set the baud settings, so I'm going to have to go back in there and look at that. Obviously, that could be a problem.
Yeah, there's a drop down right by the port selection.
Okay, yeah.
Where it says like auto and stuff like that. Yeah. So I noticed that kind of shifted around because I think that baud rate was in the next line and now it's in the same line, at least in the interface right now. So it definitely has an impact on that USB connecting.
All right. I will check that out. And I'm sure we'll have more to report on both rigs and potentially other rigs going forward with wfview as it continues to develop. So tell us about how you've fallen into and rapidly back out of love with Pipewire.
If running WFU on Fedora and watching it segfault every time wasn't enough. I was trying to work a 6-meter opening today, and I noticed that I wasn't getting any output to my SCU17, which is the rig interface I have for audio for my FT450D. And I thought something was amiss, and I started messing around with the volume settings that I had set down because the SU17 kind of sucks. Not as good as a signal link for this particular use. I jacked it all the way up, and sure enough, I was still not getting any audio to the device. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's an update or something like that, and maybe just it's gone wonky. So I killed everything, did a DNF update. Of course, there were some Pipewire packages in there, and it still doesn't work. So so I missed the 6-meter opening, and I was kind of upset by that. So we'll see. I might be updating the Shack box with something else. In the meantime,
go back to Garuda instead of Fedora or something along those lines.
Yeah, maybe. I had Garuda on the little toy laptop, and I had the Dragonized edition like I tested before, and I don't know if maybe it was just the glossy display that's on this laptop, but it just seemed like it was just too much eye candy. It was almost distracting looking at everything. So I'm not sure I would actually use that, but I might consider it because I have a matte display that I use on the Shack computer. So I don't think I'd get some of that glowiness that I was seeing in the glossy display. I'm sure people like that with glossy displays. It just seemed like a bit much for my eyes to look through and go through all the data and stuff like that. So, we'll see. I'll keep you all updated when I do that. It probably will be this week, possibly this weekend. So there it is. Pipewire. Not a huge fan at the moment. Although it runs fine on the desk or my other computer here that I don't do any ham radio stuff on, that I do Discord and video calls. I just got off a Zoom call with it, and yeah, it works fine. I had no problems at all with that. So it might be just a specific issue with the WSJTX and its interface with the audio bus and stuff like that. So I don't know exactly what I can do to fix it. If it's fixable, I don't know if I want to worry about trying to fix it. So, yeah, that's the nice part about backing up your user directory and stuff like that. You can pretty much swap in and out systems pretty quickly. It's just a matter of installing all the software, then just having it point to the CQR log database that's already built and everything else, and it all comes up the way it was. So, no big deal.
Yeah, and I remember when you were talking about Fedora 34 and the fact that it used Pipewire, that I asked specifically how the ham radio applications were handling the back-end audio. And you said, well, it's shimmed into Pulse Audio or to make it look like it's Pulse Audio and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's maybe not so.
Yeah, and I saw another thing on Reddit, of course. Someone else was having issues with some of the Pulse Audio add-ons. I think it was Pulse Effects. I've used that in the past too, and apparently it's having some intermittent issues for some users with being able to add audio processing effects to input and output devices on the fly. So yeah, who knows? I mean, it could be an early step, and maybe this is just the transitional pains of moving over. But I'll still keep it on the main laptop here, and kind of keep track of it, and who knows, maybe it'll smooth out the rough edges.
Pretty cool. And I just threw in here that I wanted to talk for maybe 30 seconds about JS8 call. Instead of having my computer during the day just kind of sitting on FT8 and hitting a contact or two just as they sort of pop up on my screen, I figured I would just have JS8 call open instead after I finally got it working and actually understanding where my rigs were and rig control and getting all of that put together. I've sent out a couple of like heartbeat pulses and got responses back, so it's in that sense it's a little like a beacon and stuff like that. And I've watched a few people have some conversations on JS8 call, but there's just so little traffic on JSA call, and he said when we talked to him that 20 and 40 meters are kind of where it's at, so that's where I was sitting, and there's barely enough communication going on there for me to even want to keep it going, I guess. I mean, part of the problem is I'm at work and I don't necessarily want to be having a full-blown QSO while I'm working, but I don't know. It's the whole thing seems a little bit cumbersome to me, and I kind of want to like it, but I've got some more work to do to get there, I guess. I'm gonna keep plugging away at it. I want JSA call to be a part of my Linux and ham radio experience and all that, but it just hasn't been particularly exciting so far. So I guess I got more work to do to make something out of it. But at least I did get it working, and it works well. And tweaked a few of the settings and stuff to make it sort of fit the way I work on the air and stuff. So getting the software up and going wasn't that big a deal. I just got to get to the point where I actually enjoy the mode. So we'll see how long that takes.
You had issues too with your dual rig setup, didn't you, at one point?
Yeah, for some reason I wasn't able to select between I wasn't able to get it to properly connect to the rig control daemons, but I don't remember if I just bypassed that and went straight to the USB ports or if I actually got it to work the way it's supposed to. But whichever thing I did, it's working. So I think I actually got it to connect to rig control D. I think it was basically just an issue where I had to reboot because something was just munged or whatever. And after the reboot, it was fine. So
sounds like Windows.
Yeah, Linux is becoming more like Windows every day.
Oh no. The end is near.
Yeah, it's been near for a while. What are we, like 2 minutes to midnight or something?
The doomsday clock is ticking.
The doomsday clock, yeah. Don't know where that's at. A bunch of eggheads stand in front of a fake clock and say, "Oh, it's 6 minutes to midnight." Oh, whatever. But yeah, well, when we aren't around for them to report on where the clock is, that's the problem. I think that's all I've got for tonight. That's the end of our short topics and our short little editorializations and discussions about various things. So that means it's time to bring Cheryl back in here and run down through the social media roundup.
Alrighty then. So this time for our Patreons, we have Jim Lawson, Patrick Ang, Douglas Schock, Eric Guth, Brandon Rozek, John Spriggs, Robert Lewis, Robert Pitts, Douglas Redder, David Jakeway, Darren King, Cubicle Nate, Erna Costales, Samuel Vimes, Peter Caffrey, Richard Gordon, Paul Griffith, Jonas Rulo, Donald Gover, Herb Garcia, Steve Sainer, Steve Metcalf, William Heckelman, Randolph Smith, and Andy Webster. For our subscriptions, we have Chris DeLuca, Andy Cowley, Chris Muller, Carl Backus, Isaac Gear, Thomas Foy, Michael Burdack, Kevin Ivey, Tony Coberly, Ronald Ike, Johnny Kinsey, Peter Spots, Fred Cole, Bill Piotr, Jeffrey Boris, I'm getting ahead of myself, Robert Halliday, Wayne Hill, John Clark, Steve Hepler, Michael Jopling, Roger Pereira, Howard Dittmer, Todd Bowers, Michael Carey, A. Taylor, Dylan Engel, Jim McKenzie, Bill Collins, Robert Black, Darren King, Randolph Smith, Robert Yerke, Steve Piella, Alan Wilson, Mark Farrell, and Jeff Zimmerman. On Facebook, we have Dan Murphy, Carmelo Luca Costa, Grant Fritz, and Mike Farmer. On Twitter, we have Prophet of Woe, at Gus Linux, and at SK Joldifer. We're just going to go with that. On YouTube, we have Swath, Donald Libby, Steve Miller, Roland Jansen, Mohammed Norzam H.J. Abbas, Valerie, I'm guessing, Madvidef, Broken Wind 2, and Jay Leejoy. Still working on the mailing list, and there were no merchandise sales.
Yep, that pretty much takes us down. I think I typoed. I think it's Medvedev, not Madvidef, but so,
Okay.
yeah, what are you going to do? So that takes us down to the bottom. You know, I noticed that we had a bunch of people sign into the Discord today, so maybe we're going to have to start mentioning the people who joined the Discord.
Maybe we should.
Because we had 4 people just today. Your audio expert, 9 Angel, Mike Deal, and 7 URH, and Amy D, KB9IQX, all joined the Discord just today. So that's cool. Thanks for being a part of the program and joining us on our social media network over there at Discord. And before we go, we should definitely mention the folks who are with us live in the chat room tonight. We had, I'm sure there are more people than this, but these are the only ones I know for sure were here. We had Don, KC9ZMY, The Menace, Ted, WA0EIR, Tony, K4XSS, and Steve, KA7HVT. I suspect that there were 1 or 2 others, if not more, but I can't be sure. So, you know, it is what it is. Unless they want to, like, pop up, like, in the next 5 seconds and say, hey, I was here. We'll be sure to mention you. But with that being said, we have come down to the end of the show. All the topics have been covered, and we hope that you will have a good week and tune in for the next episode, which, of course, will be a deep dive, which will be recorded on Thursday, a few days from now, and released the following Monday. And I'm sure the topic will be exciting as soon as we figure out what it is. So stay tuned for that. And anyway, have a great week, and we'll catch you for the next episode. This has been episode number 414 of Linux in the Ham Shack. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD 73.